African leaders criticized Israel's military campaign in Gaza, called for an immediate ceasefire. Yeah, like I said before, African leaders are taking a more proactive step in this whole conflict in Gaza. For far too long, African leaders have been silenced, have not really taken the responsibility to also add their thoughts and opinions on global conversations. You can imagine that the African Union or African leaders sat and watched NATO under the banner of Barack Obama came into Libya, destroyed the country, killed Mohammed Gaddafi, and then left. African countries did nothing. They sat there and watched. This has been a very, very bad remark on African countries and their leadership. So I am happy that South Africa, Namibia, and now the African body as a whole is rising up and saying that enough is enough. They are now saying something that we want a ceasefire in Gaza. We have realized that Israel has done more than enough to punish the people in Gaza. And what Israel is doing in Gaza is not making Israel safer. It's not helping Israel to be safe. Rather, it's playing into the hands of Hamas. This whole thing in Gaza will just give Hamas the opportunity to recruit more fighters. Hamas is going to use this against Israel and the West. Hamas is going to tell the people of Gaza, you see, we told you guys, your lives matters less. No one cares if you live or die. That was why the West sat back and watched Israel did this to you. And if you are someone who lives in Gaza, whose family have been killed by Israelis' airstrikes or ground invasion, who has lost loved ones, who is angry at Israel, who feels that the West has neglected them. Won't you be open to ideas from Hamas? No matter how deplorable, how destructive that idea might be. So what the African leaders are saying here is that a military solution to a political problem never worked out. And Israel must figure out another way to solve their problem with the Palestinians. So let's continue. African leaders have condemned Israel's military campaign in Gaza, urging an immediate end to the ongoing conflict that disproportionately affects civilians. The criticism was during a conference in Uganda hosted by the Non-Aligned Movement, a coalition of 120 states that do not align formally with any major power bloc. The president of the United Nations General Assembly, Denis Francis, expressed deep concern and dismay over the continuing calamity in the Gaza Strip. In a strong statement, he implored the NAM to leverage its influence to bring in a halt to the devastating violence, questioning how much more suffering the region could endure. I must tell you that I am deeply concerned and indeed dismayed about the ongoing calamity in the Gaza Strip. And so I call upon this movement to exert its influence in bringing a halt to the carnage that we are or helplessly witnessing. That situation behoves us to ask, how much is enough? Francis stated. Many people have asked this same question. How much is enough? How many would be enough? How many will Israel kill before they realize that they've done enough? How many would Israel killed before they come to terms that their method is not working? How many people must lose their lives for Israel to feel safe, for Israel to have a false sense of safety? How many will have to die? Now they have killed plus or minus 25,000 people in more than 100 days. And in these 25,000 people, Israel is not sure of how many of those people are Hamas fighters. And initially, Israel said that Hamas has about 40,000 fighters. So how many of those 25,000 people who have been killed so far are Hamas fighters? No one knows. When will this conflict in Gaza end? No one knows. What happened after the conflict ends? No one knows. Even the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't really know what happened next. Is this war going to bring peace or more chaos in the Middle East? And if I have to bet, I would say more chaos. But then again, that is just my own take. What about you? Let us know in the comment section below. So let's move on to our next story for the day. UN chief hopeful on Africa permanent seat on the Security Council. Yeah, this has been going on like forever. African countries have been saying forcefully that they deserve a seat on the UN Security Council. Isn't this undemocratic, or isn't it unfair or maybe biased to have a Security Council whereby Africa is not a member, Africa is not represented? Isn't that one-sided? How can 54 countries, 54 member states have no permanent seat at the UN Security Council? How come? So Antonio Guterres is letting us know that there is hope that Africa might one day get it. We don't know how long that will take. We don't know when that will come to be. But like he said, let's be hopeful. Let's continue. The United Nations Secretary General said all 5 permanent members of the Council agree Africa must have due representation in the body. Guterres addressed Sunday the 3rd summit of a group of developing countries known as Group of 77 in Uganda's capital. In recent declarations, public declarations, I have seen the permanent members being favorable to at least one African permanent member. The United States said so. The Russian Federation said so. China has been positive in this regard. The UK and France too. So for the first time, I am hopeful that at least a partial reform of the United Nations Security Council could be possible for this flagrant injustice to be corrected, and for Africa to have at least one permanent member in the Security Council. It is not guaranteed. Nothing that, of course, depends on the Secretary General, it depends exclusively on member states of the General Assembly. But for the first time, I think there are reasons to be hopeful. Yeah, I think it's long past time Africa got a place on the Security Council. It's long past time Africa be taken seriously. How can you have a body that is supposed to govern the world, but the world is not represented in the body? How is that democratic? How is that fair? How is that balanced? Remember, South America has no permanent member. Likewise, Africa has no permanent member at the Security Council. Why Europe has two or maybe three, if you consider Russia to be in Europe. They have France and the United Kingdom, and maybe Russia. So this is highly unfair. Very, very unfair.